Hello there. This is the 51% on France 24. I'm Erin Ogunkeye, stepping in for Annette Young. This is a special edition on the debate about how inclusivity is shaping the global conversation on artificial intelligence. First, then, the AI Action Summit here in Paris this February gathered some 100 world leaders, tech executives, international organizations, and other civil society groups to lay the groundwork for governing the blossoming industry. Well, it put growing global fractures on full display. While the French government insists that it will pursue inclusive, ethical, and safe artificial intelligence technologies, the White House is ideologically opposed to those objectives and even sees them as innovation-stifling red tape. Here's the U.S. Vice President.
We believe that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and we'll make every effort to encourage pro-growth AI policies. And I like to see that deregulatory flavor making its way into a lot of the conversations this conference.
Well, for a closer look, then, I have the privilege of bringing two extremely complimentary guests on the show today. That's Dr. Eleanor Drage, Senior Research Fellow at the University of Cambridge, as well as Zinnya del Villar, the Director of Data, Technology, and Innovation at Data Pop Alliance, which is a nonprofit working to make AI a force for positive social change. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Drage, because I want to know why the concept of inclusive AI is increasingly being framed as being incompatible with innovation. And then on top of that, what role do regulations play in this debate?
Well, regulation is not the opposite of innovation. Not all innovation is good, and we need regulation to create thoughtful innovation. We need companies to consider carefully, who is this product for? How can we best bring it to market? All of those things, good regulation actually supports. Otherwise, we just operate by Silicon Valley's move fast and break things mantra, and that's bad for everybody.
Zinnya, a recurring theme in this summit is the claim that regulations stifle innovation, as we heard the U.S. Vice President imply in those remarks there. But in what ways do these regulations protect users, especially from a feminist or gender equality perspective?
In fact, they are compatible. We can think of both of them, that both of them are speed incluent. If we include, for example, ethics directly in the technology way, we can have diversity teams that reinforce their learning, their context, etc., in all these algorithmic, and they can test directly their solutions with that. So that's exactly what we are looking for in terms of technology.
Dr. Drage, for you, I think all of this begs the question of whether or not technology itself can be feminist. You co-wrote the book Feminist AI, Critical Perspectives on Algorithms, Data, and Intelligent Machines. I know you also explore this idea in your podcast, The Good Robot, which I absolutely love. So do you think the concept of feminist AI is purely theoretical, or does it also have a practical application?
Absolutely. Feminism has some surprising applications in AI. It reminds us that science is not neutral or objective. It depends on where it's taking place, the ideas that the scientist has in mind, who a product is funded by. For example, if AI is being funded by the military, that will direct its applications. It also tells us that context is really crucial. A tool that is on the market as being a universal tool for everybody may actually be an AI tool that helps some communities, but is really bad for others. So you see, feminism can be really useful in shaping the way that we develop systems and question who it's good for and why it's being created in the first place.
Zinnya, I'd like to hear you react to that, because you're, of course, a practicing data scientist. You build some of these technologies that we're having these debates about. In your field, do you see a serious interest in building AI programs that are really pursuing feminist or gender equality efforts, or is it an empty marketing tool?
No, completely. We are hearing more and more in this field. For example, we have a lot of bias and mitigation tools directly in the technology that we are using. We are using two inclusive AI education platforms that, for example, all these STEM programs that we have around the world to push the skills of women. Community-led research initiatives that are inclusive, for example, to create artificial intelligence systems that are created from the communities, and of course intersectional impact studies that in case that we have an artificial intelligence system that is working for a community, for example, we can have the impact and assessment in an intersectional and gender perspective.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but before we do, we're going to take a quick break to learn about some of the ways that artificial intelligence is a force for positive good. Whether or not it can be feminist is, of course, a debate that we're unlikely to resolve here and now, but it is an opportunity, again, to achieve progress. Here in France, for example, artificial intelligence brought a major breakthrough in detecting endometriosis with saliva tests, as you'll see in this report from Peter O'Brien.
Léa Pelleuse is hoping this small tube will be the end to years of pain.
Si vous pouvez cracher au moins jusque-là, ça serait vraiment très bien.
A simple saliva test will determine in just a few days whether or not she has endometriosis. She's got the symptoms, but no doctor has been able to diagnose her.
The pain spreads to the hips, to the sides, and to the back. I've waited 11 years, and now there's finally something like this.
Il va y avoir quelque chose comme ça.
Until now, only scans or invasive surgery could detect endometriosis, and it could take up to 7 years to diagnose. Far too long for a disease that can have serious consequences.
Not only does it cause pain, but in 30% of cases, it can lead to fertility problems.
The new test changes everything. Artificial intelligence has processed lots of data and built up a picture of the kind of saliva that indicates the disease. So your saliva can now be analysed in a lab to see whether it's a match.
Bonjour, Madame Quentin.
Annabelle Quentin's MRI scan proved fruitless. It was only her saliva test that revealed the truth.
The result is positive. This confirms all your symptoms, which are very debilitating. Painful periods that often prevent you from going to school, for example.
An early diagnosis allowed her to receive treatments quickly, changing her life.
Now that I'm being treated, I don't think about it at all anymore. I don't feel pain, and my daily life is much less affected.
The spit test, which is 97% accurate, will be reimbursed by the French state. For now, it's being offered to 25,000 women.
It costs €800 per woman. Once we have the results from these patients, the National Health Authority will give a final opinion, which will validate the test's benefits and lead to broader coverage for all women in the country.
It sets an example of better healthcare for women, 2 million of whom suffer from endometriosis in France alone.
Now, one of the things that report makes me think of, Dr. Drage, is, of course, the money behind it. Investors obviously play a huge role in deciding what direction artificial intelligence takes. Have you seen projects that could, outside of the medical field really, that could be instrumental in moving the needle on gender equality but fail to arouse any interest or to obtain significant funding?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are some incredible people who are creating AI, for example, that help women start difficult conversations around female genital cutting by Priya Goswami, who's an amazing app developer. And of course, this is very, very difficult to get funding for. There's also a fantastic voluntary organization called Masekane that makes natural language processing, which is the way that we develop AI, work better for over 2,000 African languages. So this makes AI more inclusive of languages on the continent, and they find it incredibly difficult to get funding.
And what are the concrete risks of AI technologies that refuse to include inclusive design tools? How can major tech firms or investors be convinced that inclusive technology is something that affects everybody?
all the persons need to be represented in the artificial intelligence system. We need to have trust in our system that we have to be represented. Of course, economic inefficiencies that we can have, the artificial intelligence system, we can afford this economic part, and legal and regulatory risks too.
And for you, Dr. Drage?
Inclusive design is good for everyone, and that's been proven. We have major risks, for example, around Internet of Things devices, those little devices you have in your home to track and monitor perhaps elderly relatives or to tell you how much energy you're using. They've been used by domestic abusers to track and monitor their spouses or their partners in households. And it's only by having women on the team that it was discovered that this would be a risk. So this is why diversity is incredibly important, and inclusive design matters really for everybody.
Dr. Drage, to conclude, we're used to hearing about greenwashing when it comes to climate policy. And in listening to both of you, it really begs the question of whether or not there's a growing trend of inclusivity washing when it comes to big tech and especially to artificial intelligence. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think the fundamental issue is that companies, AI companies in particular, don't understand what diversity means. I've had AI engineers tell me that their teams were diverse because they had an Irish guy or someone from the Netherlands on the team. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what diversity means and why it's important in AI design. And then the other issue is that big tech have come up with these very significant ethics principles that they think are important and have traveled around the world like a Big Mac. And I call this the McDonaldization of ethics principles, because we're seeing the exact same words like transparency and fairness, which can be really meaningless because there are hundreds of mathematical definitions of fairness, or don't be biased, these weird Hippocratic oaths. We see these on the Dubai data principles. We see this with the Egyptian responsible AI charter, exactly the same terminology. So big tech is just washing away culture and making its own ethics principles stand in for everybody else's.
Here's to hoping that that message will be heard then by the important stakeholders. That's unfortunately all we have time for this edition. Dr. Eleanor Drage, thank you so much to you for coming on the show. To you as well, Zinnya del Villar, thank you both so much for your time. Well, that's all we have time for now. Until next time on the 51%.